Debate.
The Honourable Member for Random, Buren St. George's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I will be splitting my time with the member for Newton North Delta. I rise today to speak in support of my colleague's motion with respect to the indispensable role of Radio-Canada in providing national, regional, and local programming. As a former journalist with CBC, I think it's fair to say that I can speak with some knowledge about the corporation and what it offers Canadians. And what it offers Canadians, Mr. Speaker, is the opportunity to learn from each other from coast to coast to coast. CBC has been referred to as the home of Canadian content. It offers services in English and French in 5 time zones. It provides coverage in 8 Aboriginal languages, and it provides coverage in 8 international languages for new and aspiring Canadians, and 9 languages via the CBC's Wide World Network. Now, some people might say, why are we spending taxpayers' money on offering programs in languages other than our 2 official languages, English and French? Mr. Speaker, it is because that is who we are in this country. A mosaic of people from throughout the world, many of whom chose Canada because of our reputation as a caring people and a country. We care enough to make sure they have every opportunity to learn about their new home, including via the country's public broadcaster. In fact, Mr. Speaker, Section 27 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms says the Charter shall be interpreted in a manner consistent with the preservation and enhancement of the multicultural heritage of Canadians. The recognition in the Charter of the multicultural heritage of Canadians speaks to the importance of ensuring there is a forum for all Canadians to express their views no matter what their heritage, and the CBC has been helpful in fulfilling this role. By reducing funding to the CBC, are we not compromising that opportunity? When the Minister of Citizenship, Immigration and Multiculturalism refers to the CBC as a bloated Crown corporation, does he not realize how valuable the CBC is to our multicultural population? Without the CBC, I think it's fair to say Canadians born in this country would not have the opportunity to learn about every region of the country. Many don't have the opportunity to travel and welcome the chance through the CBC to discover information about Canada and other Canadians. One example, Mr. Speaker, of a great program hosted by a fellow Newfoundlander, Rex Murphy, is Cross Country Checkup, Canada's only national open-line radio program broadcast live across the country every Sunday. For anyone who has listened to Cross Country Checkup, you know Rex initiates a lively discussion on issues of national importance that Canadians are only too eager to speak about, sharing their thoughts and opinions. I mention Cross Country Checkup because when I see comments from the Prime Minister where he refers to the CBC as a government-sponsored loser, how can he not see the value in programs produced by the CBC where the emphasis is on Canada and Canadians? In Newfoundland and Labrador, a local radio program called The Fisheries Broadcast is the radio program to tune into for information about anything to do with the fishery, a vital industry in the province, one that continues to provide a living for many despite the collapse of the ground fishery. Whenever I get a chance to listen to the Fisheries Broadcast, it is obvious just how much those involved in the industry use it and appreciate it. Since its inception in 1951, the Fisheries Broadcast has covered stories about the fishing industry, reflecting the people and the communities that depend on the sea for their livelihood. The program provides basic survival information to fish harvesters, such as marine weather forecasts, meeting announcements, and the opening and closing time of the various fisheries. For more than half a century, Fisheries Broadcast has been considered a trusted and essential communication services provided by the CBC. Unfortunately, with the Prime Minister's view of CBC as a government-sponsored loser, programs like the Fisheries Broadcast could one day be on the chopping block. That, Mr. Speaker, would be a tragedy. When you reduce spending to a Crown corporation like the CBC, in this case, and leave those in charge no choice but to make decisions taking into account the funding cuts, anything and everything is up for consideration. In Newfoundland and Labrador, invaluable programs like Radio Noon will be cut to 1 hour, and a program called Living Newfoundland and Labrador has been cancelled. Living Newfoundland and Labrador has been an interesting program, not only for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, but it has aired in other Atlantic provinces, just as similar programs from other Atlantic provinces have been carried in Newfoundland and Labrador by the CBC. Canadians learning about Canadians instead of watching American-produced programming is not a bad thing, Mr. Speaker, and should be encouraged. I recall watching an episode of the Rick Mercer Report in which he interviewed people in the United States, asking them questions about Canada. Their lack of knowledge about Canada and Canadians was appalling. Even Rick Mercer was doing his part to educate Americans about Canada, even if he was taking a shot at them while doing so. By the way, Rick Mercer is a fellow Newfoundlander as well. The government's latest funding cuts could result in as many as 20 jobs eliminated in Newfoundland and Labrador. While we talk about the loss of programming and the seriousness of these cuts at the CBC, the personal side is something that tends to get lost. I know of a cameraman who has lost his job, a father of 3 whose wife is a stay-at-home mom. In this economy, Mr. Speaker, finding a job for either the husband or the wife will not be easy, even if possible. It is possible that this man will end up on EI, trying to provide for a family of 5. He will go from one government-funded job where he was a productive member of society to trying to make ends meet on EI, a fund administered by the government. A poll conducted by the Daily News in Truro, Nova Scotia, asked readers if the government should have provided the funding to ensure the CBC didn't have to axe hundreds of full-time jobs across the country. It was clear in the responses that CBC is considered to provide a valuable service. I'm sure the response would have been the same throughout the country, Mr. Speaker. Why then, at a time when hundreds of thousands of Canadians from coast to coast to coast are losing their jobs, did the Conservatives decide to play a major role in seeing the loss of hundreds of more jobs? The Minister of Industry is on record saying, do we need the CBC in its current format, when there are so many private broadcasting channels available? Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, such a comment shows the absence of any understanding of the mandate of the CBC and the important role it plays in the country. It should not be seen as one or the other. Both have a role to play, and both do it well. The difference is that in many small rural communities throughout the country, the only presence is the CBC. It serves as the voice of Canadians who live in those communities. In my riding of Random-Buren St. George's, there are over 200 communities. In fact, to drive from one end of my riding to another, it takes 9 hours. And I have 8 isolated communities. The CBC is indeed the voice of Canadians. And my residents and my constituents listen to the CBC. To quote the President and Chief Executive Officer of CBC, Hubert T. Lacroix, the corporation brings Canadians programming when, where, and how they want it on 29 services and multiple platforms: television, radio, the internet, satellite radio, digital audio, and a recording label. According to Mr. Lacroix, only the CBC provides 21 hours of Canadian program in regular prime time. In the last 4 years, CBC increased by 38% their investment in Canadian dramas and comedies. CBC created a Made in Canada reality segment. CBC commissions more developmental, commercial-free, child-focused programming than anyone else in Canada. CBC has increased its focus on original current affairs programming, highlighting Canadian issues and international events from a Canadian perspective. While Mr. Lacroix likes to boast about what CBC has been doing, and rightfully so, my take on it is that the CBC has been fulfilling its mandate, and if given the opportunity to do so, would continue down that